60 years ago, this seemed impossible. 15 years ago, this seemed impossible. 10 years ago, this seemed impossible. We decide what's possible. Be a voter.
Welcome to everyone who's just joined. You're free to put your name, where you're coming from, and why you're called to climate action in the chat so we can all know who's in the room. Thanks so much for joining. It's really fun to see everyone's answers to why you're called to climate action. So feel free to put your name, your location, and what calls you to climate action. Thanks so much. I see Ron says we have a limited time to change what we're doing to our planet. Jim and Decora, we are motivated by concern for our
60
children.
years ago, this seemed impossible. 15 years ago, this seemed impossible. 10 years ago, this seemed impossible. We decide what's possible. Be a voter.
Kate, God's call to care for creation. Ren in Des Moines, I'm called to climate action to build a sustainable environment for all. So keep them coming. Put your name, your location, and why you're called to climate action in the chat, and we'll get started in just a minute.
Hello and welcome to the 2022 Iowa Interfaith Power and Light Called to Climate Action event. On behalf of Iowa IPL staff and student leaders, thank you for coming. My name is Kaylin Howe. I am a senior at Clark University and I am a Called to Climate Action student leader. A few things to note before we open with a reflection. We are using Zoom webinar today, so that means you will not have audio or video. If you have any questions during the Q&A time, please type them in the Q&A located at the bar on the bottom of your Zoom screen or in the chat. We are also live streaming to Iowa IPL's Facebook page if you do get kicked off. And we will be recording this event, which will be shared on our YouTube channel later this week. Any general questions can be asked in the chat box. We will be sharing the general agenda in the chat now. After a brief introduction and reading of this year's faith statement, we will present this year's keynote speaker, Dr. Jen Sand, which will open into a Q&A. This will be followed by a panel discussion with an amazing group of young climate activists who will lead us to our closing. Now I'd like to introduce my fellow student leader, Sam, who will lead us in an opening reflection.
Thank you. My name is Samantha Sanson, and I'm a junior at St. Ambrose University, and I am a Called to Climate Action student leader. I would like to take a moment to start with a reflection. Let us be thankful for the wonderful people gathered today at this event. Even though we cannot be near each other, our hope is that we can open our hearts and minds to be able to truly connect with one another. Let us appreciate the work that each and every one of us has done and will do in the future. Though we will discuss the growing climate crisis, know that this is a time where you can be at peace to learn and be inspired to create just change and ease anxiety. We pray that if nothing else, this event will at least start the conversation, because it can be a small gathering that will create a big change. Thank you for joining me in the action of reflection and coming together in the spirit of climate action.
Thank you for that reflection, Sam. My name is Micah Koistra, and I am a senior at Dordt University. I am a Called to Climate Action student leader. For those of you who are just getting to know our organization, Iowa Interfaith Power and Light is a faith-rooted nonprofit that empowers Iowans of faith and of conscience to take bold and just action on the climate crisis. One of the ways that they do this is through our Called to Climate Action student leadership program. In 2019, Iowa IPL brought together their first cohort of Called to Climate Action student leaders. Students worked together to write Iowa IPL's yearly environmental justice faith statement and plan our annual Called to Climate Action event. I found value in the opportunity to learn about other traditions, reflect on my own, and look at all of the ways that we can integrate these beliefs into climate action. I feel blessed to have been able to work with my fellow student leaders this summer, and would love to introduce to you all Sam Sanson, Kaylin Howe, and myself as the 2022 Called to Climate Action student leaders. So like I said, my name is Micah Koistra. I am from a small town in Northwestern Ontario, Canada. I'm majoring in environmental science and biology with a minor in community development at Dordt University in Sioux Center, Iowa. I was introduced to Iowa IPL by a friend of mine who was a member of the 2020 cohort, and I was very excited to hear about and then join this community that is leading climate discussions in Iowa. This summer was an opportunity for me to experience climate action in a more professional sense, but also helped me to make personal connections to my faith and why that motivates me to act. I would strongly recommend this program to other students who are interested. Irene and Elston have been such great resources and teachers. After this summer, I feel much more empowered to lead discussions about climate that I wouldn't have been comfortable with before Iowa IPL. Thank you.
Hi again, my name is Samantha Sanson. I'm from the Quad Cities, and I'm now attending St. Ambrose University in Davenport, Iowa. I am majoring in political science and theology. Iowa IPL was an opportunity for me to explore something completely new, and it's giving me opportunities to make a much bigger impact than I thought I would. As a student of color and growing up low income, I always heard of people like me being impacted by climate change, and knowing that there's spaces like this where I can share my experiences and reflect those of others is powerful. This summer, we started discussing climate anxiety, and this was one of the first times that I heard mental health and the climate crisis be discussed together. I'm hopeful that this event will touch the heart of others as it did me.
I am Kaylin Howe. I was born and raised in Dubuque, Iowa, where I live now and am finishing my degree at Clark University in history with a minor in Spanish. This past summer, as a Called to Climate Action student leader, the connections between my own faith, my care for the environment, and the communities I'm a part of were profoundly strengthened. I was able to take action on the topics I care about, and I'm still seeing the impacts of our work. For me, this experience has really compounded what I already knew to be true about myself and my future, and has propelled me now into a future focused more on how I can continue to chase the dream that I have to just leave the world better than I found it. So one of our priorities this summer was to put together a faith statement communicating the path forward. We're so excited to share it with you and encourage you to sign on using the link in the chat. So Micah will kick us off with the statement.
So we will be, like Kaylin just said, reading our Called to Climate Action 2022 to 2023 faith statement, and it's titled Inspiring Hopeful Climate Action. As people of faith and of conscience, we are called to care for and live in harmony with the natural world. Human-caused changes to our climate contradict this calling, and we resolve to take hopeful action. The path to climate justice requires intentional conversation, building a responsive community, and showing compassionate love to ourselves and to our communities in Iowa and beyond. Intentional conversation creates opportunities to learn from new perspectives, encourages resilience, and instills hope, showing that we are not alone in our work. These interactions can also help Iowans to make informed decisions to improve their individual and community climate impact. Hope and determination are the building blocks of climate justice. As climate leaders and global citizens, we welcome people of diverse backgrounds into the discussion so that climate action can be a bipartisan, interfaith, and cross-generational effort.
We must empower and unite the diverse communities we are a part of. Together, we must inspire and hold responsible those in power and those causing large-scale harm. Following Indigenous leadership and learning the history of the land we live on provides crucial guidance for climate action. Indigenous groups such as Great Plains Action Society here in Iowa campaign to end mining, halt the installation of oil and carbon capture and storage pipelines, return stolen land, and more. Learning, voting, and advocating against harmful systems and entities that prioritize profit over ecological well-being is everyone's responsibility. We can also embody our commitment on a daily level through individual actions, like recycling, growing a garden, and reducing travel. Through these practices, we imagine and build a better world.
We move forward with proactive hope and a sense of growing abundance and deeper connection between the earth, ourselves, and each other. Our faiths are a foundation of the call to care for our world. Intentional conversation helps us build a community pursuing environmental justice as an expression of our faiths. Lasting change can come when we lean on and lift up our partners in climate justice. Just as climate change is an obstacle we all face, protecting our climate is a gift that we can all participate in. Building a diverse community that engages with hope for the future makes us more resilient and capable to address the wide-reaching effects of climate change. We welcome you to share your passions and connect with a community of humans working towards a brighter future. Thank you, and we encourage you to follow the link in the chat so you can return to these words, and please sign on. Together, we will build a brighter future. I will now turn it over to Kaylin to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you. Dr. Jen Sand was born and raised in beautiful Northeast Iowa and is now a licensed psychologist in private practice in Des Moines. She grew up enjoying the great outdoors with a naturalist father and a mother who taught her to religiously wash plastic baggies and recycle. She went on to attend St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, and graduate school in counseling psychology at Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. She currently loves working with individuals and couples from a social justice lens, nurturing healthy relationality and connection to authenticity and intuition. Jen is trained to be a climate reality leader through the Climate Reality Project and is happy to have played a leading role in bringing a local chapter of the organization to Des Moines. She also loves time with her pup and 2 boys. We're so grateful to have Jen here today, and I am more than excited to pass it off to Dr. Jen Sand.
Thank you, Kaylin, for the introduction. Thank you to Elston and Irene for hosting this wonderful event. I'm such a nerd. I've really enjoyed preparing for this presentation. So I'm really glad to have had the opportunity. So what brings me here to talk to y'all today? I would trace it back to 2018 when the report on climate change was released out of the UN. And climate scientists started saying like, hey, we've got a real problem here, and shared the devastating news of the impacts of climate change that were already happening all over the world. I found myself up in the night worrying as a parent about the kind of world that my 2 young boys would face, whether they would have a natural lifespan, those kinds of questions. And so I'm sharing today from my personal experience in moving through climate anxiety, as well as what I know about us as humans from my professional experience as a psychologist, and more specifically as a somatic therapist trained in the form of trauma treatment known as somatic experiencing. The book, A Field Guide to Climate Anxiety by Sarah Jaquette Ray, starts out with the invitation to imagine yourself thriving in a climate changed world. As I read this invitation, my breath caught. Something about the idea of thriving in a world in which we are facing the biggest existential threat known to humans just viscerally felt wrong. The author goes on to say that this is what they noticed as well when they posed this question to their students. Sometimes our bodies tell us that we shouldn't be enjoying ourselves or living fully and vibrantly under our current circumstances. But willing ourselves through climate activism is not sustainable long-term and can easily lead to burnout. If we don't figure out how to thrive and allow ourselves to do so, we can't nourish ourselves for the path ahead. So some level of climate anxiety in our current world is pretty natural under the circumstances. What is climate anxiety? The American Psychological Association refers to it as a chronic fear of environmental doom. That sounds pretty scary. And what connotation does doom have? That of death. And not just our death, but those of our loved ones, mass casualties in far-flung places in the world or places closer to home, entire species of plants and animals. Given that the primary directive of our bodies as mammals is to stay alive, this is a terrifying state to live in. But death feeling closer than we'd like can enrich our lives. If we allow it in, there can be a relationship with the possibility of death being near and are leaning into our lives intentionally to soak up what we can in the moment. In fact, in her book, Bittersweet, Susan Cain suggests that opening up to this space where pain and joy mingle can help us to experience life to the fullest. So how do we do this? How do we help our nervous systems lean into and move through fear, anxiety, grasping to a state of greater flow and receptivity? First, we need to understand what's happening internally for us. The oldest and most primitive part of our brains, the reptilian part, is working constantly to evaluate threat to our survival and address it. If it is assessing that we are safe in the moment, we can open ourselves up to our lives and direct our attention as we wish. If, however, a constant barrage of scary or even terrifying information is headed our way about the threat to our planet as we know it, and our very species, then we are chronically living in an activated state of threat response. What does that mean? It means vigilance, adrenaline, flooded nervous systems handling fight, flight, freeze energy. So it is a question not just of how do we handle the emotion of anxiety, of fear, but also how do we address nervous system activation and threat responses when the threat is not an imminent threat like a tiger in the room, but an ongoing massive threat of undetermined length. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And our bodies are often, if we are taking the threat of climate change seriously, asking us to respond as if it were a sprint. So first, to identify how to handle the emotion. In order to ease our poor, overwrought nervous systems, we need to cultivate curiosity and shift toward our experience. Our emotions, while sometimes painful, are certainly not negative. Our emotions are simply signals from our bodies about what to pay attention to. Once we realize we are feeling something, we can take a moment, when possible, turn toward it and allow our body to know that we've actually actively received the message it is trying to give us. This might look like sitting down and saying to ourselves, I've been feeling meh this afternoon. Let me be still for a moment and see what might be underneath the meh. Being quiet, asking ourselves what is there. There may be a few tears, some sadness. It may become clear that there's anger or a heaviness, a fatigue. We may still not know, but simply making space for and fully putting our attention on the meh and staying with it gives it the chance to transform naturally and gives our body the relief of knowing it successfully sends us messages so it can stop sending the cues. Anxiety is a natural human emotion that we all experience. It tends to be a secondary emotion, which means that there is often a more primary emotional experience underneath. This can include sadness, shame, guilt, fear, disgust, or anger. So a direct way of handling anxiety is the example above, of diving deeper to assess what we are feeling underneath. Our systems don't really allow us to not handle anxiety and get away with it. If we don't, it leads to more anxiety, depression, or often numbing behaviors to avoid. On the more innocuous end, this might look like distraction, like TV or scrolling, all the way to substance addiction or other types of addiction. Once we have come close and allowed ourselves to be with our emotion, that can naturally shift our nervous systems into the counter to these painful places. This looks like feeling contentment, peace, or even just neutral, which can be a significant relief after having felt pain. It's lovely to have nurturing practices designed to shift us into these spaces, such as going for a walk or other positive coping strategies. But sometimes we can get there naturally and more directly by being with the pain or discomfort intentionally. I like to differentiate between bad pain, such as shame-motivated thoughts like I am the problem, which don't tend to be helpful for us to feel into, and good pain, like the grief that arises naturally when we learn about a recent climate catastrophe. Part of the complexity of sorting out our responses to climate change is that the lack of responsiveness and appropriate action by public officials over the last few decades can be triggering for our own experiences of childhood relational trauma and other forms of trauma. When it comes down to it, we are mammals, and we behave in response to threat as other mammals do. However, working against us are our two smart brains that try to shut down our instinctual responses to that which overwhelms us. When we fall and twist our ankle in public, we quickly get up and limp away instead of sitting, assessing the damage, and allowing our body to literally shake off the excess adrenaline, which is likely what it would naturally do. We have a complex social system in which we fear judgment by others, which sets us up to ignore our more subtle bodily clues about what we need in the moment to attend to ourselves well. Trauma is the lasting impact of that which has overwhelmed our ability to cope throughout our lives and which left us with excess adrenaline stored in our systems. What is traumatic for a person cannot be evaluated by the triggering situation itself. It's the impact on any individual body with their particular history. After years of providing somatic therapy, I trust that if a person's body is saying that something was traumatic, that it was. The story of the trauma always makes sense when you zoom out and the whole picture is seen. When we think of trauma, we often imagine a car accident or a veteran who has been to war. But for Black and Indigenous people of color over the centuries, the impact of colonization and genocide, displacing Native peoples and disrupting their right relationships with the earth is incalculable. The impact of oppression for all kinds of marginalized groups creates a kind of cloud in society that can create a death by 1,000 paper cuts type of experience of microaggressions, not to mention more major types of violence. A great resource on the topic is Resmaa Menakem's My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. It's also crucial to recognize that most of us have had some relational trauma from our childhoods. This is the human experience. As the holistic psychologist recently posted, all parents will hurt their children, will fail to meet their needs, and will project their pain. Parents are human beings, not machines. How does this relate to climate change? Well, our own personal painful histories are easily triggered by the failure of those in power to take direct action that matches the magnitude of the climate threat. Our bodies remember moments when our parents or primary caregivers did not take action to support us when we were scared or vulnerable. This means that there is good reason why we experience a multi-layered cascade of emotions and bodily sensations in reaction to climate change, both from the current threat in front of us and the reminiscent feeling from our childhood. So now that we know some of these multi-layered sources of traumatic energy, what do we do with it? We can nurture what I like to call body listening. So sometimes we are feeling activated and can sense that our bodies need to release something. A beautiful thing about our bodies is while they store our trauma, they also store our healing. They often know what we needed to do, but could not at the time the trauma happened. We can take a quiet moment to notice if there is anything our body wants to do, any action impulse present for us, remembering that we are in fact mammals. If we were impalas on the savannah, we would run like the wind if there were a predator. Sometimes we might notice energy in our feet. Experiment in those moments with letting your feet run a bit while seated. Maybe even do it now. You'll see my computer shaking. We might notice tightness in our fists. Let those fists form and shake them. Our whole arms and shoulders might be lit up with tension. Seat yourself against a table in a rolling chair and slowly push yourself away from the table or a wall. A beautiful boundary exercise is to just do this all the way around you and feel your boundaries, feel the space around you. It can calm your nervous system. Sometimes we go internally and we find that there is some disgust there. We might lean into that response and shiver and shake our disgust out. We do all kinds of weird things in somatic therapy. We might notice tension in our jaw and move into it, noticing that it becomes a growl or a snarl. We also might use our fantasy and see the full expression of our fight, flight, or disgust itself play out in our mind. The incredible thing is that we can receive healing simply from being present with our body while we play out our fantasy. Being with our body through these methods, again, gives our body the message that we listen to it, and thus it can relax and release the cues it is sending us. These are all things that you can excuse yourself to a quiet place to do if you're finding yourself overwhelmed in a social setting, and do not mean they're the kind of thing we would actually do. I also highly recommend trauma therapy and having a guide to support you in releasing this internal activation. In Iowa here, I often look for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. It's a common type of therapy that therapists are trained in. So other than the internal work of being with yourself and your experience I've described thus far, what can we do to address our climate anxiety? Climate action, finding the right fit and amount for you and your life, cultivating sources of meaning, and purpose in your life. Do things that fulfill, nurture, and sustain you. If an opportunity of this type is before you, ask your body if it's for you. Does your body get warm, cold? Let it tell you if your answer is yes or no. Understanding our need for holding environments in which we feel safe and secure. This might be groups of people who also know the threat of climate change. It might be a particular spot in nature that is soothing for you. It might be sharing your fear or grief with a particular friend who knows how to hold space for you. Nurturing spirituality. This is not for everyone due to religious or spiritual trauma or other reasons, but for me, this was incredibly helpful on my journey. Reading the book One Mind about the evidence for universal consciousness was a turning point for me in my feeling safer and held in this world post my own personal climate anxiety. But for you and whatever practice or belief system you might hold, there are also, I'm sure, incredible resources out there. We can boost our access to pleasant sensation through meditation or breathwork practices. There is also amazing research coming out on the efficacy of psychedelics as a treatment for trauma, and that they are safe and even anti-addictive. At this time, ketamine is legal, and the FDA is evaluating more psychedelics that may be approved as early as next year. Michael Pollan's book, Changing Your Mind, is an incredible resource in this area. Titrate our climate change data consumption. Be present with how you feel as you take in the news and identify if it is intuitively affecting you in a negative way. Examine your relationship to death. Allow grief and being with it, recognizing that resurrection follows. The death life cycle is such a part of nature, and it continues. For me, the book Being Mortal was instrumental in this area. Finally, leaning into music, art, having a form of creative expression can be incredibly resourceful. A lot of these later ideas are to support you in leaning actively into pleasant sensation. I want to be clear that I'm not implying today that any of what I'm saying is easy. If you're attempting these practices and struggling, then I'm right there with you. This is all to be a process in figuring out what works for you and your nervous system. We're all different. So I invite you all to blame me when your roommates or loved ones wonder why you're growling around your house after this talk today. Just say, Dr. Jen made me do it. And ending with a reminder that this is slow work, a marathon, not a sprint, and that with nurturing and intention, we can work to help ourselves thrive in the midst of climate chaos. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Sand. I know I feel more hopeful and inspired. Once again, my name is Kaylin, and it's my pleasure to facilitate a Q&A now with Jen. So please put your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. And we'll begin in just a minute then. Okay, I will start with this one. What advice do you give to individuals who express fear of having children, even if they truly want children, because of the climate crisis that they would be born into? Is that a common question people have, and what's your response?
Yes, absolutely. I think people who take this threat seriously are really weighing the prospect of having children. I happen to have I already had my kids by the time I was really understanding the gravity of the threat. And I just think that it's an individual choice for every person. And that what I came to, I suppose, is that and obviously just being with my children, I value however much time they get, and all I can do as their parent is to help them learn how to be present in the moment and enjoy life for what it is right now. But I respect everyone's individual choice in sitting with this, and I absolutely understand when folks, decide not to. I think it absolutely is a question a lot of folks are asking themselves.
Thank you. Yeah. And then another question from the chat. How would you suggest discussing topics such as this with grandchildren, ages like 11 to 15 was the question, but grandchildren maybe in general, kids?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I always wish, I always feel as a therapist and parent, my oldest is 9, my little guy's 5, and I always feel I'm only advanced as my oldest, so because I'm not a child psychologist. But honestly, I just think kids have a lot more capacity than sometimes we might give them credit for to hold large and difficult material. Now, I would asterisk that by saying that probably a stream of scary news is not the best idea for kids, but having complex conversations about what's happening and how to wade through that. And I've been really impressed with my son's school. They talk a lot about climate change, and my little guy, or my big guy, I guess, gave a talk on climate. So they can do more than we sometimes think. And then honestly, part of it is helping them use some of the skills I've talked about today to regulate their own nervous systems if they're feeling stressed. That's what I would say.
Yeah. The next question is, what should governments do to help communities that have experienced a climate trauma, like Hurricane Ian this year or Hurricane Sandy 10 years ago today?
What should governments do? Well, I mean, psychologists, therapists who are trained in trauma, being on the ground, I think is really helpful. But ultimately, I just think that we need to be talking more about mental health and looking for signs of trauma and normalizing that all of these things are traumatic, and that folks don't need to be feeling bad if they are feeling the effects months, 6 months, a year, and on down the line, and to just get out the news about how to help regulate our nervous systems, have that be part of what we talk about, in our society in general.
Yeah. And then another question from the chat, from John. He says, your presentation was very individual focused, but so much of my anxiety comes from looking around and realizing that everyone needs to care and act about climate change in order for real or needed change to occur. Noticing that so many do not care and want to continue to consume and consume, what would be your advice on this score?
Yes, my talk was more, how do we nourish ourselves so that we can continue to do climate work. So what I would say about that is that relationship first. And that when sometimes we think, oh, if everyone understood the magnitude of the crisis, then we would all act. But part of what I hope to have gotten across today is that all of this stimulating information can actually freeze up our nervous systems and mean that we are more terrified. I saw that APA had a study that 2/3 in 2020, that 2/3 of adults in the US are concerned about climate change. So that would suggest that knowing it's happening is not the issue. We need to help people understand how to just soften, be in relationship, regulate their nervous systems, and give people bite-sized information on what they can do to take climate action, so that it's less scary and more manageable.
Yeah. And kind of in a similar vein, in your opinion, how can we help each other alleviate any kind of climate anxiety? How can we offer support to our friends and neighbors who might be experiencing this?
Yeah, I would just say being together, creating circles of people where we come together and are able to acknowledge our feelings about climate change, grieve together when there's been, another climate catastrophe, just places where we can really say like, yes, that's absolutely what's going on, right? Because it's very easy for the environment to like try to convince us that we're wrong and that there's not a problem. And so having those relationships and checkpoints where you say, yes, this is absolutely what's happening and it is sad and I can make space for your sadness is really critical.
Right. And then one last question. Get back to it. There it is. From Michael Knock, a student in one of my classes once said that because the climate crisis is so big, he didn't feel as if he could do anything about it. Therefore, he didn't feel a need to change his lifestyle. How would you respond to a comment like that?
First, I'd probably go empathy. It sounds like it just seems so big that it made you feel really scared. And I want you to know I feel scared too. So we're definitely in that together. And sometimes in my process, I felt like it was too big and I wasn't sure what I could do either. But I can share with you the things that I do, and ultimately we can brainstorm together to find some things that might feel like action you can take to help you actually feel better and maybe a little less scared. I see here too, somebody is asking for the ways to calm our nervous system. I can put my email address into the chat, and I can create a little worksheet or something to hand out to folks if you want those ways to calm your nervous system again. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, that would be great. I know I really appreciated hearing about your somatic coping methods. That's definitely helpful. All right. Well, I think then that brings us to the end of the Q&A section. So Micah, if you'd like to take over.
Thank you all so much for the opportunity. Thanks, Kaylin.
Thank you again, Dr. Sands and Kaylin, for that keynote and then the Q&A. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, we are going to move into our panel section today. Our panelists that we have with us are all active climate leaders with broad experiences and backgrounds. We're so excited to be able to have them with us today and continue this conversation surrounding climate anxiety and the ways that we can respond, how we can still feel empowered even when it seems like such a big issue, and it is such a big issue. So it is my pleasure to introduce Emily Martin from the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, Maya Asher-Rasmussen, from the National Young Farmers Coalition, Alejandro Maria Ortez from Buffalo Rebellion, Sunita Vanderlei from Iowa Environmental Council, and Caitlin Gawley from Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. We are, again, like I said, so excited for them all to be here today. So thank you for participating, and I can't wait to hear all of your responses.
Hi, thank you guys for coming. So the first question, just introduce yourselves, where you're calling in from, and 2 words to describe your mood. And if you'd also like to add how you got involved in climate action, that would be great.
And Emily, if you wouldn't mind starting, that would be great.
I'll kick us off. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Martin. My pronouns are she or they. I'm joining you from Pella, Iowa today. It's a beautiful day outside. I would say my 2 words are tired and optimistic. It's been a long year, but I'm still very hopeful for the future. And then I work on climate change through my job at Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, where I'm the conservation programs coordinator. I lead our land-based climate solutions. I'm helping with the Iowa climate assessment. I do soil health education. And then also in my free time, I work for Wonder Women, where I lead women in the outdoors. And then I also run my own group for LGBTQ+ people to get outdoors called Queer Hikers, where we're all just connecting and loving the outdoors together. So very happy to be here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maya. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Iowa organizer with the National Young Farmers Coalition. I'm also a part of organizing the Queer Farmer Convergence that happens in Decorah, Iowa, where I currently am. 2 words to describe my mood today. I'm feeling a little silly, which is lovely. I try to be silly as much as possible. And I'm also feeling the crisp air and kind of letting that settle in and letting the change of season be a time for reflection, which is, it's the great time to have this call because we're in a huge moment of reflection. I am involved with climate action through my work with young farmers and doing land access work for farmers, as well as being a farmer myself.
I can go. My name is Alejandro Murguia. I go by Ale. I use they, them pronouns. I'm actually calling out of Mount Pleasant. I'm in Des Moines, but so this morning, a nice over 2 hour drive and just hopped on. So thank you for inviting me here. Sorry for being late, but how I'm feeling, I would say, I mean, obviously a little bit tired just because of like the driving and stuff, but honestly feeling frustrated, but very hopeful. And just like, you know, whether that's in the short term or the long term, that's much of how I'm feeling. And I got involved in climate action work, more specifically, more directly through Buffalo Rebellion, through where I organized around migrant justice with Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice, and we joined part of Buffalo Rebellion. So that's how I more directly got involved.
I can go next. My name is Sunita Vanderloo. My pronouns are she, her. I'm calling from Des Moines, Iowa. 2 words to describe how I'm feeling today. I'm feeling curious because I'm really excited to be with all these other awesome panelists and hear everyone. And I'm feeling pretty like at peace just right now, kind of after a busy week. So just kind of calm for the moment, which is nice. How I got involved with climate action is I am a clean energy field organizer with the Iowa Environmental Council. And my work mostly focuses on implementation work surrounding the Des Moines Metro around clean energy initiatives. So that's how I've been able to get involved so far.
And hello, everybody. My name is Caitlin Golly. I use pronouns she, her, and I'm calling from Norris Springs, Iowa. It's up in the north central part of the state. Right now, I'd say I'm feeling encouraged, as well as kind of connected, which is pretty cool. I am a community organizer with Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement, working on our farm and environment team. And we fight for clean water, a sustainable ag and food system, as well as real climate solutions like rematriating the prairie. I'll go ahead and put some links in the chat if you're curious about Iowa CCI, and my email if you want to contact me. But I will pass it off to Micah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Like I said before, we are just so excited to have you guys all with us from all over the state and from all different organizations. Sam and I are just going to kind of keep going through a few different questions. And so this first one that I've got for you guys is if you would please explain to everyone, what is your why? So you've all kind of introduced some of what you're doing in climate action, and we're excited to hear that, but we would love to hear a little bit about what motivates you. So for myself, especially this summer working with Iowa IPL, I just really found a connection between my faith and why that motivates me to climate work. And we would love to, go through you guys again and just hear what you would say your why is and why you feel called to participate in climate action.
I can kick us off again here. So I would say that I grew up with a deep respect for nature. It very much was ingrained in my family. My grandpa would take me out hiking and just taught me to be very generous with how I view the outdoors. That's very much where I come from for my climate action and why I do the work that I do. That philosophy of only take what you need and give back more if you can to the land. I grew up Presbyterian, and I wouldn't say I'm the most religious person now, but a lot of that philosophy of caring for the earth has very much permeated throughout my life. I remember a quote my dad told me the first time I visited a national park. I went to the Tetons in Yellowstone. It's beautiful. But he called me just before I entered one of the parks, and he said, prepare yourself to see God's glory revealed here on earth. And that is certainly a way to view nature, that it is something larger than us, that it's incredible what we get to experience here, and it is our responsibility to take care of it. And I've definitely taken that personally. So I'm a scientist, and I definitely have faith in things greater than me, which for me, that might be like, I look at a lake and I see the way that water is moving and the physics happening, and it is very much greater than me. And that gives me hope. And I've been hearing about climate change since I was a kid. I remember hearing about polar bears, and Inconvenient Truth came out, and it very much was a part of my childhood. And I just knew that I had to work on it. I knew I had to dedicate my life to it. I have what it takes to work on climate change, the tenacity, the optimism, my educational background. I have the drive, and it just really fulfills me to work to save humans. And that's ultimately what I see climate change action as, is saving the people I love and everybody who's going to follow after us.
Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate that answer. Maya, would you mind going next again?
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. What calls me? I started farming. I started farming with seeds, doing seed growing work. And in that work, there's a saying, we take care of the people who take care of the seeds. And I think that holds true to the way that I advocate for climate policy now, is looking at and listening to the people who steward the land today and have stewarded the land before, those generations, and seeing the hope that is contained in looking towards hope and continued stewardship, and the possibility, if we take care of each other and we advocate for each other by really listening to people now and people before us, we can make a difference, because we always have. And it's when we stop listening that we see destruction happen. I'll go ahead and pass it on to Ale.
Thank you. And actually, I'm in a Presbyterian church right now in Mount Pleasant. So that's a coincidence. Yeah, I got more directly involved. I mean, obviously, for the last at least 10 years, have been, aware of and to some extent different levels of involved in the work on climate action. But where I really kind of felt that it was important to not only be a part of the advocacy and stuff, but more directly in helping guide some of the messaging is just given, once you're in that space, especially if you're non-white, you start to kind of learn a lot about like the history of the movement and a lot of work that has not only ignored the voices of people of color, but have actively like pushed against and fought against a lot of like the yeah, I mean, a lot of the efforts from those communities to either enter the conversation or at least, be a part of what's being considered when decisions are being made, when movements are being built. So that was, when I started organizing in migrant justice, it was around meatpacking plants and in particular, COVID outbreaks in meatpacking plants. That's where my family has worked for a very long time, and obviously is a piece of this big conversation around big ag and the meat industry and how this is all very intertwined. And realizing as I attempted to enter some of those spaces in those conversations to push big ag was that the voices of the workers and the communities in these towns in, across Iowa, for instance, were largely being ignored, and were not, they're they weren't a part of the conversation. They weren't being invited to be part of the solution. And that solution then wasn't going to center any of the voices or, not all of the voices that are going to be more harshly impacted by really any decision that is made. So, there was this need to bring those voices into that conversation, and Buffalo Rebellion helped create that space to do so, and to, when we're talking about these issues and when we're advocating that we're, centering those voices and making sure that, the whatever decisions are made are, not impacting certain community, or if they're going to impact certain communities, that there are steps being taken or being considered in terms of helping alleviate that, as the whole thread of the migration and climate justice is the fact that a lot of communities are displaced on a daily basis all over the world because of this. And a lot of that means, my family who grew corn in Mexico for generations are now unable to, make a living because Iowa has, kind of consumed the entire industry, or the U.S. subsidies, for instance, have essentially eliminated that and many industries in Central America. So, a lot of those folks end up coming here and then are exploited in the ag and in the industry. And it's just this, cycle that is very it's at the very core, I think, to a lot of how this industry operates. So it's, very important that those same folks that are being displaced, that are being, essentially taken advantage of, are a part of those conversations. So that's where, I found that opportunity when, CCI reached out with this project, and it's been really great to kind of learn and share how, all of these things are so interconnected. I'll pass it to Sunita.
Awesome, thank you. I would say my why can probably go back to kind of reiterating what others have already beautifully said, but advocating and making sure that everyone and everything is brought to the table as we are talking about climate solutions. I remember when I was like 8 years old or so, I figured out what blue whales were, and I was blown away that our planet could hold such a massive creature. But then right after that, I found out everyone was telling me about pollution, plastic, all these things that are working against these creatures. And I remember then I realized oh my gosh, what can I do to help advocate for these creatures that are truly just living their lives, and we are negatively impacting. And as I continued through school and now afterwards learning about different communities that aren't being brought to the table when talking about these solutions, I think it's incredible that climate change is being talked about so much more, that I've at least noticed, and more people are aware of it, and sustainable practices, but making sure that those are equitable in the sense of, we have these massive timelines that we are facing that are in front of us. And I think they're completely achievable, and we could still turn things around. However, they can't be turned around without making sure that everyone is given the same access to these resources, and making sure that, this fight isn't won if we're not all included in it. So that's my why. And I'll pass it to Caitlin to wrap up.
Thank you. For me, a why, I love Iowa's natural ecosystems and feel called to protect them. I have a niece who is almost 2 years old, and it's a very scary thought to think that future generations might not have the chance to connect with the land or the water and the wildlife that I've gotten to grow up connecting with due to climate catastrophes. So I want to make sure that future generations and us, the rest of our lifespans, that we have a livable and hopefully thriving planet for us to continue to exist on and live on. So that's one really big why for me, is protecting the living things, us, the planet. To kind of recap that, I want my niece to be able to grow up catching salamanders and just feeling that joy of exploration and curiosity. And it's a scary thought to think, what's at risk here. So that helps drive the work for me. I'll pass it off to Sam.
Hi. Okay, so I'm gonna ask another question. I like the order that we were going for, like passing off. So if that's okay with everyone, and you can also jump in if there's something that you want to say. I feel like it makes it easier. So this summer we read The Field Guide to Climate Anxiety by Sarah Jaquette Ray. She talks about her experience teaching specifically college students about the climate crisis. There is a lot of overwhelming issues that a lot of students face. They state a state of paralysis characterized by anxiety, depression, and apathy. What is your experience with climate anxiety, and how has your relationship to climate anxiety changed over time? And is there any way that you think we can ease climate anxiety and make way for action like you all are doing? And I can pass it to Emily.
Yeah, I would say I would have described myself as a highly anxious person for most of my life. I have generalized anxiety disorder, so maybe it seems kind of funny that I've chosen to work on something that does cause so much anxiety and is such a large problem. But I really focused on doing inner work and self-reflection as an adult. And I think that really helped me let go of what I can't control, because with climate change, there's more that you can't control that you can. That's the reality. And that's just something we have to accept, which as humans, we're really, really bad at doing. We don't like uncertainty. We love control. We love rhythm and knowing what's going to come next, but that's just not climate change reality. So I think learning to let go of what you can't control and focusing on what you can change day to day, that's really helped me both with climate change and just life. Focus on what I can do, focus on small changes, and that helps me feel better, and hopefully would help you all feel better too, knowing that these small changes eventually add up to big changes. And I've been working on climate change long enough to start to see those dominoes start to fall, that small things that I've done have started to have bigger impacts. And I think that gives me hope moving forward. And for everybody out there, making changes in your own community where you can affect change. I said polar bears really drew me into climate change. I'm not working to help polar bears directly right now. That's just not, I live in Iowa, that's not happening. But I can do things that ultimately may impact them. But focusing on your own community, your own social circles, whether that is just gathering with people, that's really important, is forming community if you don't have one, helping people to feel better, educating each other, just everything makes a difference. I think if you focus too much on the high level stuff, that you'll forget that you have people around you who need your help, that you have your own community where things are happening. So just making those connections has helped me.
Yeah, Emily, I really relate to the connections. As the Iowa organizer with the National Young Farmers Coalition, I get to talk to a lot of farmers. And as an organization, we set our policy based on the stories we're getting from farmers, and also on our the surveyed data that we collect from farmers every 5 years. And I think that it's really easy to, thinking about climate anxiety, it's really easy to just focus on the self, on the one. And through this work and through organizing work, as I think that most of the people on this panel and most of the people here today would say, is that community and sharing stories amongst community and lifting up our voices as a community really eases anxiety, because you're not in it alone. And as a result of that work, as a result of working together, I am working with farmers across the Midwest and across the US on national farm policy. We've seen changes happen. We've seen $550 million in funding to support projects that enable underserved producers to access land, capital, and markets, and train diverse generation of agriculture professionals become available. And and that's amazing. And that's really just because of people sharing their stories, coming together, maybe around a topic that's anxiety producing, and creating solutions out of the connection there instead of focusing on the pain of it. Or maybe coming together as a result of the pain of the anxiety. I'll pass it on to Ale.
I guess what I'd say is like the biggest thing that I've learned, and this I think can be applied to, any advocacy work that you do, and as much of what I do definitely goes like well outside the typical conversations around climate. So anything from my work to like build I guess community in like our local community, to the abolitionist work that I do, to the climate work that I do, is that like the thing that I learn and try to remember on a pretty regular basis, and am reminded of when I have conversations with folks, especially like the migrant community, is that like these things that we're told are like unattainable, like, not that radical is a bad thing, I think radical is a good thing, but radical things that are like are unattainable, I realize are actually very normal, just like the most normal things that you could believe or that you can want, or even just in general are to a large extent the default of humanity, like knowing your neighbors, being able to walk to a grocery store, having a garden, having agriculture that is sustainable. These are the defaults to what we as humans are and what we do, especially when we start to come together for community. And a lot of that has just been stripped from us, or we're in a situation where a lot of that is less accessible. Land is not accessible. Capital isn't accessible. And, so much of that is, intentionally created. But also when you're having those conversations, you start to, you're able to really connect with folks, who, maybe in their home country or in their home community, like these were it was just how it was. So that's one of the biggest things. It's just like anything, like all of these conversations are just very normal, sometimes kind of boring things, but they are like how we as humans like function. So that's always really, it's been very helpful to like stay grounded and to like ease that anxiety and to like not feel like I'm fighting this unattainable fight. So, Sunita.
Awesome, thank you. How I manage to stay grounded in this work is like others have said wonderfully, being able to connect with people, and also knowing and seeing that like you're not alone in this, that through my work I've been able to engage with different policies that actually have quite a bit of weight to them when you're so deep into it and you're like, oh my gosh, like depending on which way this goes, this will have long-term impacts. And when we're, like I said, we're facing all of these timelines, it can get very it can get really daunting, and really hard to hear anything else in the midst of all of that weight that you're feeling. But then seeing and talking to other people and knowing that you're in this with a community, and that people will continue to show up and keep showing up, and that you're not alone in this. And also something else that helps kind of ease my climate anxiety is to remind myself to be kind to myself in this work. That it cannot all be done in one day, and that this is such an ever-changing kind of world and realm. We hear different news articles every day, other studies come out, like keeping up with it, like as one individual, can be quite exhausting. So just to be kind to yourself and know that you are doing the best with the resources and the information that you have in the moment, and again that like you aren't alone in it, and just to be kind to yourself and know that like the work it will be done, but to never like feel so down on it if it's like, oh god, it wasn't done today, doesn't mean it won't be done tomorrow.
I feel like so the experience with climate anxiety that I have, I feel that fear that we won't have a home, that people will be living in disaster after homes and sacred spaces are destroyed by catastrophic storms like derechos or tornadoes and hurricanes, even floods and wildfires. All of these things that we're seeing around the country and around the earth right now. I worry about drought and our future access to food and water. Like Ali said, those basic things, and about climate smart conservation dollars going to false solutions, like the 3 CO2 pipelines that have been proposed in Iowa. So with my relationship with climate anxiety, I feel like there's just so much in the climate crisis that triggers anxiety. But it helps for me to know that there are people working to advocate for these issues, to help educate people, and push for real solutions. And as I get deeper into this work, much like the pattern we've seen here today, I learned that these connections that we build with one another are so important, that they are key to the work. And as I take time to connect and learn with the earth, as well as take time to truly connect with people, I feel a more deep sense of community. So like Maya had mentioned, it helps people and it has helped me to feel not so alone in this fight, and that there is actually hope for a more sustainable future. If you are looking for a community to share these fears and hopes with, we are totally holding a rally on November 9th in Des Moines with Buffalo Rebellion, so shout out to Ale, and many groups from the Iowa Carbon Pipeline Resistance Coalition. And so I'll go ahead and put a link in the chat for this. It's a great way to build relationships with people who do care, to learn from one another and listen to one another's stories, as well as take climate action here in Iowa. So that's November 9th, a rally against false climate solutions in Des Moines. For your plug, the link's in the chat. I will pass it off to Mike.
Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you everyone for all of your responses to that question. I loved hearing about Emily and Maya, some of the things that you were seeing in your work, and Caitlin as well, the things you were mentioning, and for the others, how we were talking about just the importance of community. That was, I think, the most meaningful thing for me of being a part of Iowa IPL, just feeling that community is so special. And so thank you so much for those answers. Our next question is, let me find you here. Okay. Do you guys have any recommendations for starting the conversation with people? So for people who aren't involved or maybe less involved, who don't feel that personal stake, or maybe they just are too anxious and they want to disengage with doubts or unsure of what they can do, how would you start those conversations, or what kind of conversations are you having with those types of people? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Community is what it's all about, that you have a sphere of influence in your life, whatever that may look like. It's your family, it's the town you live in, it's your direct neighbors, it's a network that you're part of. That's where you start. You start with talking to people that you know, and wherever they are in how they feel about climate change or their understanding, meet them where they are. Don't get angry because somebody's still questioning if climate change is real. Understand why they may have that thought and meet them where they are. I think it's easy to get angry first, and it's valid to feel angry, but then understand that if you want to change people's hearts and minds, you do have to eventually meet them where they are, just as they need to meet you where you are. So just understanding that not everybody's on the same page as you, and a conversation can go a long way where you just listen and understand. But I'll say you can affect things locally. And people may be using different language about climate change. You may be hearing people talk about, well, it's been very dry this year. Why is that happening? It's affecting my crops. Last year, our bridge to our town got flooded and wiped out, and that happened 5 years ago, and that happened 6 years ago, and it keeps happening. What's going on? My trees around my house keep getting blown down by increasing wind damage. So you may hear people say different things, and just pick up on that. And that's an opportunity for you to say, hey, you can direct that energy, that anger you may be feeling over what you're experiencing involuntarily, into action for climate change. So just listening for that different language and meeting people where they are, I think goes a long way. And again, don't try to think about climate change from the whole scale. Don't think on the global scale, think on local scale. And it's much easier to motivate people to take action. Earlier this year, I heard a great speech down in Louisiana, where they very much are facing climate change reality. If you just pay a little bit of attention on what's happening down there, it's terribly sad. But in this speech, we were talking about how it's a privilege to be able to consume more and more and not face the consequences, that we can feel so disconnected here in Iowa from our actions versus what's happening down in Louisiana. But just paying a little bit of attention, understanding that you do have an impact right now today. And you may immediately feel negative feelings about that, but transforming that into action and understanding that you have privilege and not facing climate change reality right now, but there are people who right now are advocating and having to relocate and face that. So just keeping that in mind as you're beginning to work on climate change.
Thank you. Yeah, really setting us up with your response, Emily. I appreciate it. Climate is not just an environmental issue. I think that I sometimes struggle or have struggled in the past to understand how my work is climate work, even though I've been working in policy organizing and been a farmer. And so opening up with my own sense of I'm not doing enough can be helpful, because no one can do enough. But then also bringing it back to the fact that climate advocacy and climate work isn't just about environmentalism. It's about, for us at National Young Farmers, it's about access to land and capital for farmers, keeping the USDA accountable, creating access to water for the next generation, immigration and labor justice, farmer health and well-being, housing and student loan debt. So all of these things we see as intertwined with the climate crisis. And if we support farmers in access to these different these different areas, or we advocate in these different areas, we will see, we believe we will see impacts, positive impacts on our climate, or people's ability to advocate for the climate. They go hand in hand. And so when I'm entering, I think in response to this question, it kind of depends on who I'm talking to. Am I talking to someone who doesn't agree, or am I talking to someone who's worried or doesn't feel like they know how to act? And of course, you'll take different strategies in many different conversations, but there's a deep canvassing, if you have heard of that as a tool, can be really, really helpful in shifting the conversation from causing more anxiety to creating a relationship and having a real conversation about, oh, I didn't realize that access to healthcare would create all of those different effects. I've struggled with access to healthcare. Maybe I care more about that more now, as just an example. I think that I tend to be like a pretty emotional person when I'm talking about climate. And I tend to be an emotional arguer as well. And so sometimes taking a step back, taking a breath, and just sharing my story and sharing my why, like you all asked us to do before, can really turn the script and kind of shift the conversation into a more vulnerable space. So those are a few different things.
I guess I'll just, very similar to what Maya was saying. I mean, a lot of it is so interconnected that, it's almost impossible to like see it like right off the bat that everything is so connected. And, for the most part, like most people I organize with or that I talk to, or the workers I talk to, the communities I talk to, like their most important thing is their lives and their families. So that's always going to be at the forefront, and understanding that, expecting that, and like, is so important. And I think is often, especially if you don't have a specific lived experience, it's easy to be confused as to why someone might not want to join something that is good, or be a part of something that affects them, or it's in their best interests. And it's important to reflect on that and realize that unless other issues are addressed, they probably aren't even going to be interested in talking to you. They're not going to be willing to trust you, and that trust is not easy. And I think sometimes we fall into a place where we think people are just going to trust us because we know we're good. So, why wouldn't they trust us? And that just isn't the reality. And because of that, these coalitions need to, form in a way that, this work is moving collectively together, whether that's, not just, sometimes bringing in folks from, to a space to talk about a specific issue, but rather, if you do work in environmental justice, having a presence in the direct conversations about, food insecurity in communities, and, just the various issues that maybe aren't as directly linked, housing and all of these things, workers' rights, as, has been mentioned, or, core to things that are, obviously on a like daily basis impacting a lot of communities. And if you're not in those spaces doing that work, you're not going to reach a lot of the folks that need to be reached on the issue. And, but to build that trust to, then start to make those connections with folks about, how all of this is connected. And, that's how I learned about just how ingrained into, the migration conversation Big Ag is. And, the same folks that are, displacing people abroad are then recruiting them and then deporting them. So it's like, this is an entire system that is, again, intentionally built this way. But still, it's something that we can address in both like locally and, obviously at the state level and such, but that local connection is so key to, being able to have, more conversations with folks, or for them to even open up the door to you. So that's where I think like the shift in how I organize has really evolved, as well as just kind of, there's like a quote from the Zapatistas that is always in my brain, which is like, questions are for walking, not just for sitting around doing nothing. Like, you got a question, you got to do something with it. So, that's something that I, try to introduce to folks as well as a concept, especially when, there's that, like, there are a lot of folks that want to do something, but maybe are just waiting for the call to action, or, the confidence to do it. And I think that's often, just a very helpful mindset to be in, when you're facing some of those obstacles trying to talk to people.
Awesome. I would say, to not repeat too much of what has already been brilliantly said, but again, like, this work there's so much room, there is so much intersectionality within this work, and recognizing that, and then also as you are approaching people, to talk about, I guess also walking into the conversations knowing, like, yes, like, you may be talking about climate change, but like, I think out of every conversation I've been able to have with an individual at whatever level on climate change, there's always another factor that I have my own blind spots to, and acknowledging those in the conversation as well, and to never, try and act, if there's something that's brought up that I have not been aware about, acknowledging that and thanking the person for bringing it to the conversation, and seeing how that work can blend together, and also truly, like, listening. I feel like, sometimes we, are told, like, oh yeah, like, in our heads, it's like, oh, here's the issue, here's the action, like, here's the blueprint of, like, bing, bing, but that's not usually how it works. And sometimes people don't want to take action, they're tired. For example, so much that, like, I have my own blind spots too, the health risks and health pollution that comes with climate change, and how far those can reach communities. Those go across generations, and those are factors that those communities cannot control, and so that's a weight, that's draining, that's tiring. And to not just throw, like, actions at individuals and say, like, oh hey, like, this is a bad thing, go for it, like, listening and hearing, where they're coming from, and how, even if it's not this action, how can you listen and make sure that you're welcoming them into a space that feels safe. Like Ale said, like, it's that trust isn't just, you should never you should never take it for a guarantee. That was badly worded, but just never assume that it's always there, and respect that too, and respect the person you're speaking with, and knowing that, with that mindset, when you're walking into it, that hopefully you both can meet in the middle, but know that, listening to the individual and hearing what they have to say, and making that space very safe. Because I know I've sometimes walked into conversations, even like in this climate realm, that, like, I don't always feel like it's super open or super safe. I'm a woman who's brown in this climate, and sometimes these meetings feel a little spooky. And so, trying to be able to make sure that when I'm walking into these conversations, that making the space as safe as it can be for whoever I am talking to, because I think that's how you get the most out of the conversation for both ends.
Definitely. I think I agree with the whole gang, everything that's been said. To kind of reiterate, I suppose, like Emily had mentioned, you can meet people where they're at. We're going to have conversations with people who don't believe in climate change, but it doesn't mean that they are unmovable. So meeting them where they're at, and then, like Maya and Sunita had said, really listening, hearing for what their self-interest is in the conversation or in life, the things, like, everybody cares about something. And because the climate crisis is so interconnected and impacts almost every aspect of our life, there is something that we can likely connect if we hear and listen for what somebody cares about, and we're able to take that and connect it with a crisis. You know, they may not have made that connection themselves before, and that's a way to open the door to thoughts and a connection, so that they can start to think on that and slowly move people from where they're at. Additionally, you know, like this work can be hard, having conversations, like Sunita said, it can be draining. So don't beat up on yourself if you don't have good conversations. You know, some people just hang up on you, or if you're talking at the door, they close the door on you. If you have one good conversation out of 20, or even one good conversation out of 50, that is still progress. So I would say celebrate the wins that you get, even if it's just something as little as like a good 5 or 10 minute conversation. That is still progress and helps spread waves like the butterfly effect. So I think those are really important takeaways, and I will pass it off to Sam.
Thank you so much for all your responses. I know, Maya, I'm also an emotional person, so every time someone doesn't either like agree with me or want to like have a conversation, I am constantly like getting my anger and sadness in the way. So all of your tips on how to have conversations is something I'm gonna take moving forward. So thank you so much for that. So our last question that we have from us, and if we have time, we can open up to audience questions. To moving forward, what gives you hope? It could be short, it could be something longer, but what is something that gives you hope moving forward?
I would say everybody on this call, everybody on this panel who's given answers. I mean, I'm getting emotional here listening to all of you speak. It's an honor to be on this panel and to hear the work that all of you are doing, and that gives me hope. I mean, I'm seeing more action coming down from the federal level, the state level, people working on passing legislation to work on climate change. The city of Des Moines is working on a climate action plan. That's happening in larger scale than it ever has been, to my knowledge. I know Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation is working with climate scientists to help publish the Iowa Climate Assessment, which will hopefully come out next year, which will provide an understanding of what's even happening in Iowa on different levels. So I'll paste a link to that when I'm done speaking here. So I just see more and more action being taken. And I really think that I'm seeing people move from, is this happening, even to what can I do? And that's evidenced by everybody who is here listening today. People want to know what they can do, and we're definitely in a different place than we were even 5 years ago. So that's giving me a lot of hope.
Thank you, Emily. What's giving me hope, like Emily said, being here with you all gives me a lot of hope. And that being said, if you all participants would want to write what's giving you hope, and maybe we'll take like 1 minute to write that out, and then we can waterfall it in the chat. I find that what gives me hope is hearing what gives other people hope. So give me a little hope. And I'll chat a little bit while you're doing that, and then I'll send the call to press enter so we can do a waterfall, so it kind of explodes in the chat. I don't know why I said I was gonna chat at you while you were writing your responses. Okay, everybody go. Relationships, yeah, Elston. Solar panels, and the animals grazing underneath them. I hope to see more of that in Iowa. Sam gives you hope. Cover crops. Love it. I think that is what I get to do a lot at my job, is just listen to farmer stories. Right now we're working on, I work with 25 farmers who are part of our 1 Million Acres for the Future campaign, and they're writing op-eds about what land access changes they want to see in the 2023 Farm Bill, and getting to read those and getting to read your comments in the chat. That's what brings me hope, is that there are so many voices to uplift. there is so much to hear. And as long as we keep asking people to share their stories, there's going to be hope.
I guess not to do too many quotes, but another quote that's been keeping me hopeful and grounded is what is it? It's another world is necessary, another world is possible, another world is happening. But emphasizing really the another world is happening and keeping really that at like the forefront of like that and you know, whatever headspace I find myself in is, you know, because I know that people are doing the work and there are people doing really amazing work in my own backyard. I mean, there's so many folks that want to, and one thing that I learned also semi recently is that I've never had a unique thought in my life and that I just haven't met the other person that's thinking that. And as an organizer, that's largely our role, is bringing people together that have, you know, either that same goal, the same thought, or just a, you know, common idea. So, you know, those things of like even if you do feel alone because maybe nobody showed up to your event, or, you know, those kinds of things, like the people are there. And, you know, again, it's going to take time, but, you know, we just have to keep creating spaces and trying things. And if they fail, try something else and just keep trying. Not to go back to the Zapatistas again, but that's how they make their decisions. They just keep trying. And if it doesn't work, then they're not, you know, I think we tend to, at least as a country and as, you know, how we make decisions, if something's not working, we tend to just like pick at it and try to, you know, make it work, when a lot of times we just have to go back, just try something else. And I think we're often afraid to do that, especially when we're so sunk into, you know, either a system that has existed for however many decades, and feeling like that, you know, we just have to reform it, we just have to change it, and it'll, you know, one day do the thing it wasn't supposed to do, instead of, you know, start again. And I think that in our day-to-day life and in our organizing work, it's important to recognize that, like, sometimes things don't work, and that's fine, and just try something else.
Yeah, I think I will reiterate what Emily said at the beginning. Like, everyone on this panel is bringing me hope. It's bringing me like just little like heart flutters of like, oh, so good. Like, this is amazing. So I'm so grateful to be able to speak with all of you and be in the same space. I would say probably two things that bring me hope. One is time, and it's something we have right now, and it's ours. We can do what we want with it. You know, you have power in what you do, and, you know, helping uplift others as well and what they choose to do with the time that we have. And so I think that's something that brings me hope, knowing that, you know, we're not 10 years from now when it's all scary and spooky, but, you know, right now we're here and seeing what we can do. And like Ali said, try again, keep trying, you know, seeing what works, what doesn't. And then also I'd say I've been in my current position for just about a year, give or take, and I've met so many people that inspire me and push me to be better. And I've been able to learn so much from that. That just brings me a lot of hope too, that knowing that, you know, even if like it's feeling overwhelming and the solution isn't in front of me, even just one conversation with someone, you know, can help bring light to that. And there are always so many more perspectives and support and just like comfort that can come from just talking to other people about this and knowing that, you know, none of us are in this alone. And so to hold on to the community that's around you and welcome everyone in, because, you know, that's how we'll get through this.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. So, I mean, first off, something that gives me immediate hope is all of you for showing up on a Saturday. I saw the participants at one point was 35 people on a Saturday morning. I love to see that. So thank you all for being here with us, for caring, for being curious and continuing to learn. Other things that continue to give me hope is, of course, community and collective action, but also seeing people engage with the land. like going out to prairies, playing in the wetlands, or just sitting by the river. And then the beauty that still exists in nature. When I go to the prairie and I can just, like, we'll say it's summer, I can just sit down and watch a butterfly flutter onto the flowers. Like, that inspires so much hope inside of me that it pushes me to continue to keep fighting and keep pushing this idea. Again, I'm going to plug this action that's coming up on November 9th, putting it in the chat for you. Please come out if you're in the Des Moines area or if you want to travel. We're going to have a really fun day taking action together. And again, it's a great way to meet other people who care and continue to build connections with one another and keep that hope alive.
Thank you so much, guys. I've just loved hearing from all of you. It's been so awesome. We have a few minutes now. If anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, you can direct it to all the panelists. You can ask a question of a specific panelist if you would like. Just drop it in the chat if you guys have anything that you'd like to ask them. And I'll just give you guys a minute. Otherwise, we will, keep going. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A. I hope I'm not missing anybody's, but I do just have one quick final question. You guys don't all have to answer it, just if something pops to your mind, but just on this topic of hope. And Caitlin, what made me think of it was you talking about this rally. So maybe that's your answer to this question, but what is just one like exciting thing you guys are seeing some climate action in Iowa right now? Anybody can answer, just join in, whatever.
Well, I can kick us off with this one. So of course, taking that action together and building community. But another thing is with this CO2 pipeline. So there's been 3 proposed in the state of Iowa, and this is a really unique fight where different people are coming together. It's a bipartisan issue and it impacts all Iowans. So many people are coming to the table who we don't see usually work together in these spaces and fight for the same common goals. So that's one really exciting thing, to see people starting to unite, to make those connections, see that, oh, we do have something in common. We all care. It connects to this issue. Let's go and talk out about it. And then they get the chance to hear about how it connects to other issues in our lives. So just the fact that the door is open right now for all of these connections to be made and that people are taking this opportunity is really inspiring and exciting and happening right now in Iowa.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I don't want to cut anybody else off, but okay. Otherwise, we can kind of move on to our closing section. Thank you again to the panelists for taking your time out of your day to share with us, for your thoughts and your wisdom. You are all so cool, and I just have loved hearing from you guys. And thank you, for the work that you guys are doing. It is so inspiring and so encouraging, especially as a student, to see that there's work being done in the state and just to feel the hope that brings to go into the future and to go into future careers. So we're going to move into our closing section now. We're all just going to share a brief reflection about our time at Iowa IPL. So I'll kick it off. And I have truly enjoyed working with Iowa IPL this summer, working with Irene Elston, and I saw that Allie was in the chat too. So shout out to Allie. She's amazing as well. They have all been so great, and I just feel very blessed to have worked with them along with Sam and Kaylin. So being present with this community today and being part of this event is something that I'm also very thankful for. I am excited to engage more with the realities of how we work in climate and how even when we are feeling anxious, how that can affect it, but how we can still move forward with so many experiences and so much knowledge between this community that we have here today. Just thank you to everyone for being part of it and for your support.
Thank you so much for everyone that participated. Like one of the panelists said, it's a Saturday morning, so I'm super thankful that you all took some time out of your busy weekend to come and join us. I know I said before, but this was something new for me this summer. I have never worked in anything in climate action. I took like one climate change class, and somehow it's something that I got really interested in, and continuing to do this work even during my school year and like past this summer, it's been incredible and I've been learning a lot. This event specifically is something that we've been working very hard on over this summer, and I'm glad that we are able to share with everyone a topic like climate anxiety. It's not really talked about. So I'm like super grateful to be around such incredible leaders and to continue my work in climate action. And I invite all of you to also do the same, and hopefully this inspires some conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that I will be thinking about today, this event and the things we've discussed for a while. But at this moment, I'm just so grateful to have gathered with you all today and to feel that sense of community that we've talked about. I feel comforted, hopeful, and inspired to keep working towards a better future. I also would like to invite you to drop a sentence or a word even in the chat to share what you are bringing with you from this event. And with that, I will turn it over to Iowa IPL Executive Director Irene Damaris.
Hello, I'm usually behind the scenes, especially for this event. This is the first time in 3 years I've been healthy for this event, so very exciting. Anyways, I'm Irene Damaris, and I have the honor and pleasure of being the Executive Director here at Iowa Interfaith Power and Light. For the past 3 summers, I've been so blessed to work with our Call to Climate Action student leaders and to see them grow in their faith, integrate climate action into their futures, and find hope as they enter the world after college. This program truly is a highlight of my work at Iowa IPL. And on a personal note, I'd like to thank Allie Parker, who is watching from Boise, Idaho. Allie was our program associate before moving to Idaho. We were really sad, but thrilled about her new adventures. And she truly was integral in this program before leaving in July. She brought forth the resource of the climate anxiety book that obviously really shaped our work all summer. So for the past 4 years, we have run Call to Climate Action program on donations from our supporters like you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. This is a ministry, and to have support in ministry is just something unbelievable. Iowa IPL is also growing. I'm so excited. Elston Tortuga joined our team in June as our very first rural faith organizer. And in November, this is really exciting, we're actually adding two new program associate positions. So one's going to focus on development and communications, and the other is going to focus on advocacy, education, and policy. And as a team of 4, we will be able to increase our capacity in every way. Again, this is only possible because of your support. That's doubling our size. So just imagine what we can do with that energy, that commitment. So excited. Many of you have already made a contribution or a gift to this work, and we invite others to also join in giving a contribution to help support faith-based student leadership for bold and just climate action. You can do that online at iowaipl.org/donate, and you'll also be getting a follow-up email thanking you for participating today that will include information about supporting this work. And I just, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you again for all that you all do to support Iowa IPL and our students. Thank you. I want to invite Micah to close us out.
Thank you, Irene. I'm just going to share a closing reflection, and then I just hope you all have a great rest of your day. So we are thankful for the opportunity to gather together today and for all of the gifts and the work that made this event possible. We celebrate the opportunity to be in community with each other, even if from a distance, and the diverse gifts and backgrounds we all bring to the table. Thank you for the influence of faith and conscience and experience that motivates us to care about our climate and take action to defend it. We pray a blessing over everyone here, and that we will experience encouragement and renewal in our commitment to work in climate going forward. Thank you all for taking time out of your weekend. Have a great Saturday.